Welcome to Have a Life Teaching, the podcast designed for educators who are dedicated to enhancing their teaching practice and creating a positive impact on their students' lives. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the world of education, exploring a wide range of topics related to curriculum, instruction, and assessment in K-12 schools. Together, we'll learn from the brightest minds in the education field. So if you're a passionate educator who's ready to take your teaching practice to the next level, join us as we explore the exciting world of education. My name is John Shimbari, signing in and saying, let's have a life teaching. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Have a Life Teaching podcast. We have many shows talking about literacy. I do believe that every show brings a unique aspect to the teaching of literacy, because let's face it, literacy is the core of all learning. We're all literacy teachers. It never hurts to keep talking about literacy and figuring out ways to engage our students in literacy and helping them develop a sense of that. This is why I'm really excited to be having a guest on that has a unique perspective on the teaching of literacy, creating a sense of love in reading and ultimately, hopefully, writing. And my guest is Dana Seith. She is a professional writer by trade. She is a mom. She is the creator of the wonderful card deck series called Tell Me a Story, which is a series of cards that enable students to create their own fictional story using cards related to different elements of a fiction text. Really an idea to engage students in learning, published by The Bitter Southerner. I'll have information at the end of the show on where you can also get your card deck of Tell Me a Story. Dana, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me, John. I'm so excited to be here.
Dana, what got you involved? You're a professional writer. You were telling me before you produced this game that you worked for CNN for a time. What made you decide to produce Tell Me a Story?
At the time I created it, when my kids were small, I was working a really big corporate job and the pandemic hit. And like most people, your job either was feast or famine. Mine happened to be feast and was very busy. I was a writer for a global CEO, the North America CEO of a global tech company, and was super busy. And I had at the time two little girls that loved bedtime stories. And I'm a very creative person, but I'm more creative at 8 in the morning and not 8 at night. I loved having that really nice time with my kids, but they'd always want a made up bedtime story. And I was fried. During the day, when I could sneak away 5 minutes, I would look up Aesop's Fables or Greek mythology just as a starting point to say, okay, when I go in and tuck Lucy in tonight, I can start with the elements of the grasshopper and the teapot, have my little starters to go with. I was like, I wish there was something out there like this that is beautifully designed, lush, that kids would like, parents would like, and that was for every age. I wanted my now 12-year-old to think it was cool just as much as my 9-year-old. Also, my mom, this could be something you could sit around and play with everybody. I started looking, and there are products similar to it on the market for sure, but nothing quite like this, where you can create a story. And I wanted parents to have tools to create a really cool story for their kids, but also have to work a little bit on the cards themselves. So what I did was we created what we think are the 5 categories of what makes a good story: character, setting, plot, emotion, and then what we call a wild card. And for me, a wild card would be, those really great details to a story. Those are the nuts and bolts of any story, a good story. It's foundational to reading. And what I have learned, because I really created it for parents, but I'm realizing there are so many ties to what you're doing and with teaching, and how much oral storytelling is tied to literacy and curriculum. That has been eye-opening for me, because I created it as a tool for parents. Could even play it as a family You realized how much oral storytelling is a bit of a dying art. The fact that you can sit and connect and tell a story and bounce ideas off of each other and do this imaginative play is has been really great, and it was wonderful to create and wonderful to see people engage with it, whether they're students in a classroom or whether it's family that brings it out over the holiday break. Try to tell a really fun story.
And as you said, Dana, you created it for parents who wouldn't want more resources to keep their children
Mm-hmm.
entertained. But yes, I do think that Tell Me a Story could be utilized in schools where students are learning the elements of fiction text. If we look at Bloom's taxonomy, which says learning is leveled, you have the basic knowledge level of learning, those are your basic facts. It's necessary. You need those basic facts to make meaning, but you need more. What I like about Tell Me a Story is that once students start understanding some of the elements of a story, which is very integrated into the ELA standards in most states, that students can create their own stories and create their own stories using key elements of what makes an effective story. So that's one reason why I was excited to have you on the show. Also, to your point about oral tradition, let's face it, some of our students struggle in reading and they
Mm-hmm.
struggle in writing. But maybe if they have this tool where they could create a story that still has all the elements of a well-crafted fictional narrative. Yes, eventually we want them to learn how to read and write, but they're still showing knowledge of understanding those elements of good storytelling. And
Mm-hmm.
hopefully we'll have a sense of accomplishment that will then make them more open and excited about reading and writing.
I was going to say, and to what you were saying, or what I think you were getting to, is I think it's building confidence. Because at the end of the day, oral storytelling most of the time is in some sort of, I don't want to say it's always in a public speaking setting because it's not. You and I are having a conversation, but some people even would get nervous for just this two-way conversation. So I think, in a way, oral storytelling builds that confidence that we all need for the rest of our lives. Whether you're a boss presenting something to a client or a tween that is working on a collaborative group project and you have to present it in front of the teacher. We all need to be able to speak effectively and efficiently. And if you had a tool, okay, here's a blank slate, but I'm going to pick one card and it's an emotion card. Here's my four emotions. And it lets you then say, oh, I need something else. I'm going to pick something else. And so it lets you be okay, I think, with the space that you don't know where you're going. And you can sort of navigate, which I like because I think it is building confidence and connection in a way that gets us all to sync a little bit more than just hiding behind our keyboards.
Thinking about it first, saying it, speaking it,
That's right.
thinking about it, eventually you could put that into written words.
Absolutely. It's muscle that you want to flex. And then once you start doing that, it's like, okay, I'm going to start with a walk. And now I can start to go for a jog. It's all foundational. Start with these. And then maybe you're like, you know what? I don't need all five cards. I need two or I need one. And I want to start to build a story around that. And I really just need to think of a character. So let me just draw a card to see if I can think of a great character. But I know I want the setting to be here, here, and here. And absolutely, it's translatable to written form and other creative forms.
On that note, Dana, could you walk us through, say, an example? Let's say somebody is picking up your card deck for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Could you walk us through basically how to use the card deck?
Sure.
Again, whether you're a parent or the student themselves or the child.
Sure. You get these beautiful cards, really whimsical in illustration and great design. There's five cards, color coded. Character cards are blue. So I'm going to pull a character card. And on that, I have four choices: a neighbor, a park ranger, a land animal, or an exchange student. And then I'm going to pull my setting card. And again, these are the foundational elements to stories: character, plot, setting. So my setting: outer space, restaurant, office, amusement park. Now I'm going to pull my plot card. Changing hearts and minds, being extraordinary, a family fight, or phobia run amok. Maybe I want to be a park ranger that hits a restaurant, goes and sits down at a restaurant, but there's a big, huge family fight there. So now you're starting to build. We're going to draw, let's get a little emotion. How's everybody feeling? Speechless, curious, sad, grumpy. So this family fight happens, and everybody in the restaurant's totally speechless. They can't say a word because they're watching this whole thing happen. And then the wild card, which is this twist that adds a more detailed element to the story: weather condition, toys, musical instrument, or bad news. And you can start to tell a story. Now, if you were with a big group, you could do it around a table. Everybody takes a card. You could say, hey, we have to come up with a story using these 4 characters. You can do it in your classroom group setting. I took them to my daughter's class, and we divided everybody in groups of 5, and each person took one color and built a story. I wanted to leave it really open-ended. I want people to figure out how they want to use them. I think our life is fairly prescribed, and I don't think creativity needs total direction to it.
With that said, if let's say we were to use the cards in a school setting where we do want the creativity, but we do have standards, what are some of the examples of ways that you would recommend using your card deck?
I think it was a little bit that you hit on earlier, which is using it for fiction writing. You can definitely start to use it as a framework. A blank page is intimidating for everyone, whether it's standing up in front of a class telling a story or whether it's starting to sit down and write it. You could say, let's start to build a fiction story, and each person takes a card. I love the group setting. My kids' school does a lot of collaborative work. That's one really good way. The thought of having it as a in between lessons type thing where it's more play, one person sitting down on their own coming up with something, or it can be an entire classroom. I know my daughter's, she's in 3rd grade, but I gave it to her last year's teacher. So the 2nd graders, they put it up on a big board. They all agreed on what they were choosing, and they broke down structure of all of the elements of the story. And so that was an interesting where they projected it and made a whole huge story out of it.
I love that. And I love how it created this knock on creative effect. Students were working with students.
I love that piece of it. This whole opening with education and how much people finding their voice and exercising that muscle through curriculum. It's a whole other outlet I hadn't thought of.
And I could definitely even see having a
Mm-hmm.
teacher group talking about how they are using the card deck with their
Mm-hmm.
students.
I gave 2 examples of my daughter's class last year. Really lively 2nd graders. In her 3rd grade class, they used it very different. And both amazing, but they used it differently.
Oh, could you tell us a little bit more about that?
The 2nd graders probably didn't know how to use the wild card and that emotions come up in a story, where by 3rd grade, they knew. Introducing it in 2nd grade, which I think of that sweet spot where starting the chapter books and literacy really opens up in those age ranges and grades. But the collaborative telling the story as a group happened more in the 3rd grade, as opposed to the younger one. It definitely seemed more teacher student, teacher
Mm.
class, versus let's get these kids in different pods and collaborate and make up their own story. And you had 5 different stories going on and storylines from one deck. Not at all the same story, where the 2nd graders were more, let's build one story together. Different.
As you were talking, Dana, I even see the social emotional learning connection as well, because sometimes, let's face it, even adults have trouble expressing their feelings at times, students even more so. But to be able to express feelings and emotions through a character could be a way for that student to process maybe their own feelings that they're having.
I would definitely agree with some executive function. When I started writing on how to use the deck and why, I really wanted emotion to be there because the emotions are what make our characters do certain things, just like we do certain things, right? If you're your character in your own story, your emotions play a huge part of that. And I think right now, understanding people's emotions and they're usually incentive behind their actions, very important.
Dana, what's next for you?
A lot of what I do is community building in general. So I have a couple of projects that I'm working on. So 2025 will hopefully bring those into fruition. But I'd like to see, tell me a story if there's other pieces of this that can happen, whether it's another deck or other outlets. It could be potentially podcast or TV. I think there's other arms of this that could happen for sure.
Yeah, and what would be interesting about that would be having the students creating the
Hmm.
podcast based on Tell Me a Story, using the card deck and using what they're learning in class about elements of a story. I think that that would be very powerful. And in fact, I'm glad you brought that up because I did recently talk to someone about creating digital projects with students. Could
Mm.
definitely be a tie-in there for sure. Dana, where can people find out more about you and the work that you're doing?
The Better Southerner has the Tell Me a Story card deck where you can purchase the deck, learn more about me through my LinkedIn.
Thank you so much for your time tonight, Dana. This has been great.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening today. I hope you got some great tips that you can bring back into your teaching. Remember, have a life teaching without sacrificing your own. Also, don't forget to subscribe and be well.